Good evening. The Rio Rancho Board of Education's meeting for Monday, January 24th, 2022 is now called to order. If all would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and mute your microphones. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Kim, can you take a roll call for us?
I can do that. I just heard from Gary, and I just sent him the meeting link.
We can go ahead and track when he comes in. As soon as he comes
we'll do that.
Do you need a second to give him? Do you
no,
have
I just sent him a text and let him know that I sent it via email. And so let me get back to where the roll call is. Here we go. All right. President Galbraith.
Present.
Vice President Morgan.
Present.
Secretary Scott.
Present.
Board Member Tripp will be joining, and Board Member Tyler.
Present.
We have a quorum 4-0, soon to be 5-0.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, we'd like to welcome everyone out tonight. We have here in just a moment, we'll have some introductory comments by our superintendent. I'm sure she will kind of go through everything that we have going on, but we do want to welcome those who are given reports tonight. We have Matt Geisel here from our Rio Rancho City Manager. We also have Michael Sharp from Research and Polling here, and so we just want to welcome them on tonight. Before we get to them, we do have some business to do, and so we'll start with those things. So we'll go right into our introductory comments by our superintendent, Dr. Visu Cleveland.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being with us this evening. My comments are a little longer than normal, but you've had a couple of weeks where they were really short. So I'm trying to cover some important things that I think are really important for you to know and to share with the community as well. I'd like to really begin with a hold on, I'm trying to get it up a little bit larger so I can see it. Here we go. All right, better. I wanted to share with you where we are related to COVID, and we've got some information to share, some numbers to share. One of the things that the Public Ed Department requires of us is that we monitor the percentage of positive COVID cases, both for our staff and our students in our school district. And it has several guidelines, but when we reach 3% of a student population in a building that has COVID, then we are required to implement some additional safety precautions. And then there are others that must be implemented when we reach 5%. And so the additional COVID safe practices can be implemented at any time. We feel it is important and are needed to protect the health of our students, our staff, and the community. So we have several campuses right now, a good number, that have reached the 3% range, although 50% of our schools are still slightly below that. So we are at that first step, which the state identifies as a watch list. And that's something we are right on top of, and we're looking at. Since we started collecting data, we have not ever until today reached the 5%. But today we reached 5% at one of our campuses, and the other is very, very close in getting to the 5%. And so just last Thursday, you may recall the information I sent out to the board. We didn't have any that were, we had a couple right at 3. I think there were just 2. We now have a significant number of campuses that are there, and that's the increase just from Thursday till today. So we obviously are seeing an increase, and it is coming fairly quickly. Absentee rates are much higher, as many are out due to COVID symptoms and are waiting for their results. These are positive COVID numbers only. I want you to be sure that 3% are those that are actually confirmed as COVID, not those that are waiting, not those that have been tested. So that 3% number that I'm giving is those that actually do have COVID at the present time. So we have some testing protocols, and as required by the Public Ed Department, we established a testing center for COVID, and we are experiencing some challenges with that process. The center is located slightly across the street in the bottom floor of the MRET building, and PMG operates that testing site. We've had some questions that have come to us about why we're not doing this or that. The bottom line is that it's their testing site. It's run by the Premier Medical Group. We host the location, but it is not our operation. And it is directly under the supervision and direction of the Department of Health. So I want folks to know, they call that they don't really like something over there. We're really glad to take that information and see what we can do, but we are not running that testing site as a district. And it's real important for people to know that. There are some challenges that we are experiencing regarding this testing process. The number one thing that if we could get resolved would really be helpful for us is the lack of rapid COVID PCR tests. And so we don't have hardly any at this point. We've had a very difficult time having them in stock. We do have some of the other tests. They're not quite as good, but they're certainly better than nothing. But here's what the PCR test buys the district. It buys a person goes in, they take the test, within a couple of hours, they know whether they're positive or not. And if they're not positive, then they can go right back to work. What is happening right now, it is taking anywhere from 5 days to process results and for them to be posted. And some aren't even getting any results at all. So when we were able to do the rapid tests and know that day and have people either go home or go back to work, we were able to manage those numbers a whole lot better than we are now. We have people sitting at home for 5 days waiting for results. They don't know whether they're positive or negative, and they could be working, at that time if they were not. And many want to come back to work. They feel really good. They don't think they have it, but we have to wait for those results. We occasionally do have the antigen tests, but we don't have them on a consistent manner, on a consistent daily. Now let me back up. We don't have them daily on a consistent manner. And so when we don't have them, we can't even do the day-to-day, the test to stay or test to play or surveillance testing. So we have people who will go and be very frustrated, want to get the test and they don't have any. And so we're trying to keep people informed with that. But if we could get the rapid tests and if we could, process those quickly, a lot of the issues that we're having could be resolved. But right now we are really struggling, and there's a lot of frustration in the community with people who go and want to be tested, and we have to tell them we don't have the rapid test or we don't have any tests at all. So as I said, we have people waiting at home, and this is making the staffing of our schools extremely difficult. So challenges for keeping schools in person. I know we've all really wanted to do that. We've really worked hard to do that. And, we know the importance of children being in school. Most of the spread of COVID is coming from the larger community. However, we are now beginning to see some spread in our school and district facilities that's coming from within. And so that is a change from in the past, and that is something that is new in terms of our current situation. We are making additional efforts to contain the spread. But again, the greatest challenge that we're facing right now is the lack of staffing to accomplish both the instructional and operational functions. So we are short teachers and educational assistants in terms of teaching in the classroom. We are short custodians. We are short bus drivers. We are short other positions in terms of operations. And so staffing is becoming the single greatest challenge we have. And as I said previously, that's frustrating when we have people sitting at home waiting on tests and can't go back to work. And I don't think we would have, the number, I know we would not have the number of vacancies that we have right now if we could get those tests in. We were told last week by the governor 1 million tests are on their way to New Mexico. I hope that they get here sooner rather than later, and that most of those are rapid PCR tests, but we don't know what tests. We don't know exactly when they'll get here, but we've been told that it's a priority and they're working very hard to get those out to all the testing sites. It's really important for you to know there have been several days when we were close to not having sufficient personnel to remain open for in-person learning. It was almost right at the point we could not open the schools. We did not have sufficient staff. And what we have is people covering for one another, and we're struggling to make it work. And in the short term, people are really open to trying to make that happen. But when that's day after day after day, it begins to get really frustrating and very tiring for the staff. This past weekend, all weekend the tests came in, the reports came in. We have yet to see any improvement whatsoever in the reduction of confirmed positive cases. And over the weekend, everything actually went up instead of down, which we were hoping would not be the case. Here's some numbers I thought you might like to see. The first column is, of course, the school. The second column is the percentages as of Thursday. And you probably will recall I sent you those numbers with the superintendent's report this today. So I think you can see that we have had generally, with a couple of exceptions, an increase. And you will see now that Rio Rancho High is over the 5%, which is now very problematic. So, and I don't even, we'll be in contact with the state, but they're really feeling it in that campus right now. And as you can also see, there are a couple of other campuses that are very close. Puesta del Sol is very close to reaching the 5% as well. So this is the number of students that we had marked present but on COVID leave as of last Friday, and then what we have today. So in that sense, we do see some progress there. The new positive cases, though, that have just been marked as positive and confirmed have doubled. Our staff absences for all reasons, and they're not all COVID. People are sick with other things. They have, other issues, but this is the number of staff absences we had across the district. And you can see that those are pretty significant numbers. One of the things that is really important, I think, for the board and the community to be aware of is right now we have 140 plus vacancies that are not filled. These are positions that we have no one to fill. So people are having to try to help and support each other through this. But that's not working particularly well either. Today, we had people covering for each other at the secondary level, but we had 44 classrooms not covered outside the building without a substitute, without anyone to take that class. And so what that means is we're pulling people from other jobs just to put them in the classroom. And that's not particularly helpful because they still have their jobs to do. And it's also not very helpful because you don't have the same level, obviously, of instruction going on. The other challenge with regards to all of this is that we're then putting numbers of classes together at various locations to be able to supervise them. And our concern there is, are we actually encouraging the spread of the virus by doing that? So if we put 6 classes in the gym, we're crossing over, and we're fearful that we may in fact be contributing when we do that. However, you can't keep classes that are not supervised, and you have to find a way to make that happen. We have been pulling people out of the district office to help with the substituting. So we've tried a lot of different things, but Today, 44 classes did not have a teacher or a substitute at the secondary level. Next slide, please. As I mentioned earlier, we're struggling to find substitutes. Last week when the governor spoke, we got pretty excited because she said she was going to deploy the National Guard to help with substitutes. And then yesterday we got a message that that wasn't going to be the case, that the ones that were being deployed would be deployed to the rural areas. Talked with some of my colleagues in some of the rural districts, and they're each getting one person, which is really helping them because they struggle even more than we do for substitutes. But it isn't going to help our situation. And we really, we sent in a request for 140 that we could use in terms of substituting. But we are finding out now that's not going to happen. And so, we are, there are no substitutes to be found. And I think you could really understand why people are reluctant to come into schools right now with this situation. And I don't think we're going to see that turnaround immediately, hopefully soon. As you know, we have a new contract that will be implemented with Kelly Services that will begin operations the end of February. We hope maybe they will have some ideas for recruitment and finding us some additional personnel. That being said, they do work with the Albuquerque School District, and they are pleased with the work they do over there, but they too are still dealing with large numbers of classrooms without subs. On Friday, some of you may have gotten the message, parent guardian messaging on enhanced measures. These are the things that we're going to do, are doing now to improve safety. Visitors will no longer be allowed on the campus. You just don't want to bring any more of the virus in than we need to do. No large group gatherings, assemblies, staff meetings, large events, etc. Encouraging those to go virtual rather than in person. And here are some of the things that I think will at least temporarily be halted, and they will either be canceled, postponed, or moved to virtual. We think most of them will be postponed, and a few can be
I
handled.
went down all of them. No, oh, okay, there we go. That one is kind of.
Hey, hold on one second, Dr. Cleveland. Gary,
Microphone
you want to
away.
mute yourself?
Yep, and the line's off. Okay.
He's trying to be on our
Gary?
meeting.
Gary, please go ahead and mute. We can hear you. Thank you.
Hold on one second, Dr. Cleveland.
Can I be heard right now?
You
This is
can.
Gary.
Is there a way for you to mute yourself?
Yes.
That would be awesome. Thank you. I'm glad you're on.
Can I be heard right now?
Oh, there we go. Okay. Go ahead, Dr. Cleveland.
Okay, we're good. Our recess times and spaces will be staggered and separated. So we will have recess at different times at the elementary level, and spaces will be staggered and separated. And some of the buildings are using a different bell schedule for different grade levels. Everything to try to keep the number of kids in the hall down as much as we possibly can. Masking rules are going to be strictly enforced at events with spectators. In the past, we have asked people very nicely to put them back on, and sometimes we've had good cooperation. Most times we really have, but we are asking people to please wear their masks, or they will be asked to leave the facility, because we absolutely have to have that right now in order to have any events whatsoever. Thank you. So we have the old requirements that we have been doing for quite a while. We continue to get information about the challenges with that. And so, these are the things that we have had in place. I can't tell you that we have perfect compliance with all of those, but we continue to try to encourage and push our staff and students to adhere to those guidelines. And so most of them, I think we're in pretty good shape. We certainly have enough PPE for staff. The staff surveillance testing program works really well with our tests. Right now, they're not tests, and the same for students. All the enhancements we put in last year for air filtration and HVAC in school facilities continues to be in place, and we talk to our staff and students about the safe transitions in the building. Our teachers are asked to have seating charts for all classes, and the bus drivers are asked to have seating charts for school buses. And the purpose of that is to be able to identify who was sitting around a sick child or a sick adult. And it doesn't take us nearly as long if we have that information. I think we're doing okay on our hand washing stations and hand sanitizer, but if anyone knows that we're not, please let us know and we'll try to remedy that. Our seating is still spread out to the maximum that we can, and we do continue to encourage social distancing. That's very hard with students. It's very hard to make that a reality. The one I do want to make you most aware of that I'm very concerned about right now, and that is the deep cleaning and disinfecting of facilities and buses. And that's because we are short on an average day 20% of our custodians, and we could be short that percentage of drivers. And so getting that done is becoming very hard. And I am hearing from staff and students that some of our facilities are not getting cleaned at the level they need to be cleaned. So we're looking at how to manage that. But when you are short staff, there's really no easy answer. I also want you to know for the last year and a half, our teachers, the classrooms, educational assistants, many of them have been cleaning their desks, cleaning their surface areas, and it's just one more thing that we're asking them to do. But many have been very diligent in making that happen, and we appreciate their efforts. That being said, you really need to hear me that right now, I do not believe our buildings are at the level they need to be for cleaning. Okay, and when we get to 5%, there are additional measures or restrictions, and we thought we would have a little time before we got to 5%, but we're there, and some of our schools now are getting very close, and so we will put in some additional enhancements, but we are very concerned about how effective some of that is going to be. There is the biggest fear I think I'm hearing from folks in the buildings and at the district is that there is an increasing concern that the current numbers are undercounted. And that is due to testing inaccuracy and delays, asymptomatic individuals who are positive, but they simply don't know they have it. And they are spreading it because of a lack of knowledge. And, when you're short tests, there are people who've been exposed, but they're very hesitant to go and get tested because they don't want to take a test away from someone who is exhibiting symptoms. And that's what happens. So very concerned about just going because you've been exposed. But many of those folks may very well have COVID and not be aware of it or be certainly asymptomatic. And then we do have some that are just, even when they're very sick, they are unwilling to test for whatever reason. Okay. Madam President, do you want me to stop here and answer any questions, or would you like to go through the whole presentation and just come back to questions at the end?
No, actually, I think it would be good to stop here for just a second and just take any questions. So I actually have a question, then I'll kind of go over to the board. So with what we're seeing with Rio Rancho High School at that 5%, are we thinking that, I don't know if I even want to say it over here, but are we getting closer to a closing sort of situation for that? And then I'd kind of like to ask the board too, kind of their feelings on that, but I'd like to hear what your thoughts on that.
Yes, I would very much like to hear the board's thoughts on that. What I have found across the state and talking to other superintendents in other districts, larger districts, they're finding that once you hit the 5%, the operation becomes very hard to manage. And so many of them have moved to virtual rather than in person when that 5% was reached. I think it's really important, though, to know that it's not just the 5%. And for us, it's a 5%, but for us right now, we perceive the greater danger is the inability to have enough people to run the building. So that's probably the greater risk of the two, but many have at 5%, they have gone virtual. So that is something that we are we are thinking about and want the board's input on. There are, I think you are probably aware that Santa Fe started to see pretty quick spread across their district, and they chose to just close for 2 weeks to try to get a handle on it and shut it down. And they think that's working for them, but every school district is different.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Cleveland. So obviously this isn't a vote and we're just talking about Dr. Cleveland's introductory comments, but I do just kind of want to get a feel for the board as we go through this. I'm just comfortable to just, if Dr. Cleveland wakes up and she sees we don't have enough staff to run those buildings and that's not going to work, for her to be able to close that building if needed. But what I kind of need from, just as a feel for the board, since we have new board members, is if others feel like when those kind of things happen, if we need to come into a board meeting and have and vote on that, and how you kind of would like to do that. So I'm just going to kind of briefly go through you and just to kind of see where your guys' feelings are. And then also if you have other questions, please feel free to ask those. So real quick, I'll just go over to Jessica Tyler.
Thank you, Madam President and Dr. Cleveland. I would like to see, and especially because we're not in a situation where every school is facing maybe the same type of challenges, I would like to see Dr. Cleveland have that discretion to take action as needed to ensure safety in our schools. The last thing we want is for there to be insufficient staff for the amount of students we have on campus. As Dr. Cleveland mentioned, I think there was 42 classrooms without an adult to oversee the students. And I know my daughter today at Cleveland, she was, in one of those classes, and it puts a lot of strain on the other teachers there that are on campus. So I think that she should have the discretion to make those calls. I don't think it's necessary to bring it back to the board when things are changing so quickly. Like she stated, you see the changes in the numbers from Thursday to today. I think she needs the ability to make those decisions on a day-to-day basis to keep our staff and students safe.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. And then we'll go over to Gary Tripp, and we'll do our new board members, and then we'll go to our old board members. Not that they're old. Go ahead, Gary.
I'm another term, President Elmer. Okay.
Oh, Gary, you're still muted.
Madam President, this is Gary Tripp. I am sorry about my technology literacy skills. I promise you I'll be a growth plan and I'll work on it for the next board meeting. But I concur with everything that my colleague Jessica Tyler just said. So that's where I appreciate the comments, and I think with this change in numbers at a rapid rate, we need to give the authority to Dr. Cleveland to make those calls.
Thank you. And Noreen Scott?
I too agree with our colleague, Ms. Tyler. I think it absolutely needs to stay in Dr. Cleveland's hands to try to get us all together. It's kind of like calling a snow day. How, you can't call us all together. So I have implicit trust in Dr. Cleveland's decision-making powers.
Okay, thank you. And then Jeffrey Morgan.
I'm just going to echo the other board members. Totally agree. But I did have a question. Dr. Cleveland, I saw on your presentation and have been reading the articles that the governor is going to bring support in from the military. And I saw on your slide where it was going to the outer districts. Did they tell you why they couldn't come to our district? And I don't know if I missed that on the slide or not.
Yeah, no, a very good question. And what they decided was that they would deploy them all to the rural areas in New Mexico, and not to the urban ones. And I don't know what their thinking was. I know that it's harder to get substitutes in the rural areas, but boy, we're having a very difficult time getting substitutes here, or whether there wasn't sufficient guard members to do it. I really don't know. But we did get yesterday a message from the secretary, Friday, that they would not be coming to the urban areas and they would be deployed outside to the rural areas. We we desperately need it. And that was
Right.
a terrible disappointment because, as I said, today we had 40 for classrooms that did not have an adult that was certified to teach or a substitute who is certified to be a substitute teacher. And like I said earlier, you know, you don't mind helping out every once in a while. We've got wonderful staff. They'll step in and help once in a while. But when that becomes every day you lose your planning period. Every day, you are going to have to pick up somebody else's class, or you're going to have to pick up 2 or 3 classes and supervise them in the gym. And there's a point in which the willingness to do that begins to wane, and people just get tired, and they're already pretty tired. So we were really disappointed by that decision. And I don't know any more than that, except that the decision was made not to send them to Albuquerque, Las Cruces, all of the urban centers.
Right. And the last question I have is, what are the qualifications to substitute? I thought about taking a couple of days off and coming in to volunteer because my wife tells me how severe it is. And she've even challenged me and said, hey, baby, if you got an office day today, I would love to have you come in. So before I commit, are there qualifications? I mean, like you said, I can't do it every day because I got to go to work, but I could help every so often, you know.
You are highly qualified to do that job. And so we do ask, many of our substitutes have some college, but that's not required. You know, the primary thing is the desire to work with kids and a desire to be in a classroom and interact with students and make sure that the lessons that the teacher left are taught. So it's your primary qualification is the desire to work in a classroom with kids, and but you do have to have a high school diploma. Some college is recommended but not required, and we are just very grateful for people who come in and would like to work with our kids.
Yeah, on that really quick, I'm going to go over to Noreen in just a second, but I don't know if Lauren Hatch is on. As far as board members go and substituting, I don't know if it's actually a good idea for us to do that. Not that we don't want to, because I actually would love to help out too. But we could put our schools and also Dr. Cleveland kind of in an uncomfortable situation if we do something wrong as a board member that we're not supposed to do. And then anyway, so Lauren, do you want to just speak to that, what your thoughts are on that?
Yeah, Madam President, Lauren Hatch, the district's general counsel. Generally with school board members, by virtue of their office, they're limited to only serving as a school board member and not fulfilling any other role within the district. So we'd have to look very carefully at that, but I think state law would prohibit that from happening. Not the district's decision, it's a legal decision made by the state.
I know. I wish we could help.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Dr. Cleveland. Do you want to add?
He's right, and that is generally. I just got so excited about the possibility of a substitute. I got a little carried away, maybe, but yes, you know, it is really not, and you would not be able to take in compensation for it either, because of being a board member. But you're probably right. In my enthusiasm, I probably got a bit carried away.
No, I would love to be able to do that too. And I teach already, so I would love to just come in and help out. So we'll go over to Noreen. Scott, you had a question.
Well, I saw in the news that the governor is going to substitute. I think that would be very exciting for our high school students if she would come and substitute in our high schools. Dr. Cleveland, have you reached out and told her we'd welcome her?
I have not, but if the board directs me to do that, I would be glad to do that.
I think that would be very exciting for our kids to
She
have the
did
governor
say-
of our state come and teach.
I think it'd be great, and I will do that. She did say that they were also allowing public government employees to also substitute, just like the Guard, if there were any that wanted to do that. But again, the decision has been made to send those folks to the rural areas rather than to the city centers. So, all right.
All right, we have another question from Jessica Tyler.
Sorry, I was trying to move on, but I just wanted to see if this is the appropriate time in talking about, the possibility of having to close any of our schools temporarily, and also having that discretion to not have to do it district-wide. I know that our teachers are really exhausted. And so I don't know if there's any room for any creativity. And if we had, I believe we have some leeway since we adopted the 10 extra instructional days, to keep in mind that, that maybe there is a point where kids don't come to school or they have the day off of instruction. And that gives our teachers a day to breathe, to catch up on things like planning when they've been using their prep period to cover for other schools. That a mental health day for teachers to work from home and students to have the day off might behoove us as a district if we have that leeway in our instructional calendar, which I believe we do with those 10 extra days, but I'm not sure. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that I would be amenable to being creative in how we handle those situations when we have to close schools, whether, like I said, it's an individual school or district-wide.
I think our staff would be very appreciative of something like that right now. They are really tired, and they are, and the need to regroup. And the other is if we were to go back to remote learning, and like I said, Santa Fe went back for 2 weeks. There's some districts that have gone back semi-permanently, which we do not anticipate having to do. But you really need a day to get ready to do that. So all of a sudden tomorrow you're virtual. And so that also would be a real help to have some time if we were to go that direction, to be able to plan that. So we'll certainly take that under advisement, but appreciate that's an interesting thought.
That's a great thought, actually. Gary Tripp?
Yes, Madam President, Dr. Cleveland, I think that is an excellent thought, and I was just going to raise about the possibility of I'm sure we are, but I want to ask it. Are we ready to feed all the kids around the district? And I think that's one area where a board member could volunteer if we're needed. And I would certainly make sure that I would make myself available to make sure that we distributed food around the community to the different kids at the school site. So just want to throw that out if we kind of have that plan in place, if we do close, that we're feeding all the children.
And I would want to add one thing, that we have had some folks step in and just do lunch duties or before and after school, and those too are tremendous help for staff. So appreciate those comments, Board Member Trent.
Okay. And then Noreen, Scott, did you have another question? I see your hand.
No, I thought I turned my hand off.
That's okay. So I don't know. I hope that helps Dr. Cleveland to kind of get a good feel for the board. I love what Jessica Tyler said, maybe if we can fit that. I know we have to keep to those 10 days, the way that we receive that funding and such, but if there is a way to be creative, I think that would be wonderful. And I think everyone's in agreement with that, if those are things that we can do. So if it does take at some point bringing the board in, I think we're happy to come in and do that. But if those are things, of course, Dr. Cleveland and I talked briefly before she put out the level 3 on what was best. And I wanted to make sure it's not something that we necessarily have to vote on, but she wanted to make sure that we all felt comfortable in what she was doing, and wanted to make sure that that the board was always kind of on the same page as we do those things. So does that help, Dr. Cleveland, to kind of get a good feel for everyone's
Yes, it does. And I really appreciate it. The one thing I may be hearing a little difference of opinion on, but maybe not on the board's thoughts about going everyone or school by school. And that does impact families either way you go. So if anyone has any specific thoughts on that, certainly I think Board Member Tyler kind of addressed it. But if anyone else has any other comments they would want us to think about in that respect, I would sure appreciate hearing that.
Yeah, I'll go over to the board. I know personally, if we could keep our elementary kids in school, which I know for those teachers too, they would love to have some, but I would love to keep those kids in school as much as possible. I think secondary would be a school by school. That's kind of my thoughts on it. But I'll go over to the board. Gary Tripp, thoughts?
My thought is that kids are kind of grouped, and I don't know if I'm even explaining that right, but you may have an elementary kid at Rio Rancho Elementary and a middle school child from the home at Rio Rancho Elementary, and then even have a third child, maybe a freshman at Rio Rancho High School. So I think the household and the area of the community is what probably needs to be looked at there, because high school kids do take care of their younger siblings on days when there's a snow day usually. So my thought would be more staying where the districts are aligned within the elementary, middle school, and high school. Um, uh, that kind of throws a can of worms into the fact that you're closing one or two more schools, but you have at least the family together watching each other within the home if you do have to close. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Jessica, Tyler, did you want to add to your thoughts earlier?
No, I mean, I think like Dr. Cleveland said, there's no perfect way to do it. It puts strains on families. And so my thing is, the more advance notice we can give families and teachers to prepare, the better. But I don't think there's a perfect way to do it. I would prefer to keep kids in person learning as much as we can. But again, I know one of the schools that's reaching that 5% threshold right now is an elementary school. And so, whatever we have to do to, like I said, keep our kiddos safe, but I would like to see as many of our schools as possible stay open.
Okay, thank you. And then Noreen Scott?
I concur. I would like to keep our children in school as much as possible. And I really agree with you, Amanda, that we need to have our elementary school kids in school as much as we can. But I really think Dr. Cleveland has the best feel for what direction we need to go on a daily basis. I realize it's very difficult for families, but I just don't see any easier way around this than to just respond with the best interest of all our children at heart.
All right, thank you. And then Jeffrey Morgan.
Totally agree with the other board members. I mean, it's going to be a school by school basis decision. And again, leaning on Dr. Cleveland's knowledge and understanding to make the best decision. But I'm in total agreement. Leave as is. And yeah, I like to have the little ones. I mean, we talked about this a long time ago when we first got hit with COVID, how it was important to have our young ones in school, because one of the words that Dr. Cleveland used was a foundation. They are our future. They are our foundation. And if they miss that, they'll miss everything else. So totally agree. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Cleveland, I don't know if that helped or if we just gave you the same thoughts there.
It helped, and it's
Okay.
not going to be perfect, and everyone knows that. With regards to the feeders, one just small thing to know is our feeders aren't perfect. So, for example, at Rio Rancho Middle, they go to both Rio Rancho and Cleveland, and so in some cases we don't have perfect feeders. We're a lot better in our elementaries, though. And so, in terms of elementary and middle schools, we're pretty close, not perfect, but so there might be a few cases where that would not work out, but there are plenty in which it would. The other I would share with you, I have an opportunity to speak to one of the primary epidemiologists in this region through my association and with another organization. And so I talk tomorrow about what his thoughts are about the best way to stop the spread as quickly as we can, to try to get a handle on it as quickly as we can. And looking at some of those interventions, which ones seem to be the best, and how effective is it to try to shut it down for a very short period of time, And again, I don't know the answers to that, but I am going to try to talk to someone who specializes in that tomorrow and see what information can be provided in that area. Okay, are we ready to go back?
Yes, please, if we can go ahead and get through that. Thank you for taking a moment, though, to take all those comments and questions.
Okay. Claudia, if we can get our PowerPoint back, would be great.
Hold on, Dr. Cleveland. I'm working on it.
All right.
Can you see it right there?
Yes, we're good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just a really quick update on our boardroom project goals and update. We, of course, as you know, are working to improve our accessibility for both board members and the community at large to be able to access our meeting either in person or virtually and at the same time, because we're beginning to see that request for more and more hybrid. Some people want to work from home and others want to be here in person. And the system we have would not allow us to do both. So we're moving ahead with that. You know, we're excited to see that happening. In addition to that, though, it will also improve the quality of our video and audio for board meetings and for presentations. And one of the things that, in terms of the staff, we're very excited about, because we'll be able to use it for other things as well, like district broadcasts, like for convocation, or for professional development presentations that we would like to provide across the district without people having to come in and participate in those. So it is moving forward, and the POs are about ready to be cut, and we'll get that equipment ordered and hopefully installed in a relatively short period of time. But thanks to IT, they've been working really hard on trying to get this done. Okay, on student transportation, we continue, as you know, to struggle with student transportation. Our bus drivers seem to be hit. They're among the highest percentage of employees hit with COVID infections and symptoms. As we sent out to parents a couple of weeks ago, we might have to cancel routes in the very worst of situations. But as of now, we have not done that. But buses are still very late, sometimes over an hour. So we really do encourage parents who have other options to get their kids to school, whether they pick them up or take them, or whether they're carpools. We really encourage people to do that in the short term until we hopefully get some of these cases down again and under control. And it will be our very last course of action to cancel a route, but it does remain a possibility if we simply do not have sufficient drivers. But so far, we've not had to do that. They have doubled and sometimes triple routed in order to pick up children. And it's just, you know, they are certainly going way beyond the call of duty to try to make it work. And we really appreciate our drivers as well as the staff at the bus facility, because they have really worked hard to try to get our kids to school. But we are running a high number of drivers that are positive COVID, and we don't want them to come to work, obviously, if they are sick, because we don't want to spread it any further. Hopefully, we're going to get past that fairly soon. You know, I guess as we talk about everything, there's just really very few good options that are out there that exist for us right now. The best thing that the state can do for us, and we've shared that, and I know they're making every effort to do it, would be getting sufficient tests. And if we can get rapid response tests where people will know in a couple of hours whether they are positive or negative and could go back to work, that would really help us be able to staff our classrooms. So as well as our operational areas of custodians and drivers and the other important positions that we have. Our greatest need is for staff and students to get tested to avoid future spread. But, you know, many have tried to do that, and they've gone to the testing site and they're told there are no tests. And in frustration, they often say, I'm not coming back unless you can assure me that there's a test in place. So we're trying to keep our parent community informed when those tests are coming in and when they can go and get a test. We are hearing, if our pattern follows the rest of the country, we're hoping that we're going to start seeing some reduction in cases through February and might be over the worst of it by the end of February. But of course, we really don't know. And that's just something that, if we follow the patterns in other parts of the country, hopefully that's going to be the case. And then I just think it's real important for parents to know, community to know, prepare for remote learning in case it happens. So have those discussions now and thoughts about what you will do with your children, how you will manage it if we had to go. Again, it would be very short term. Our intent is to keep our schools open, but it is a real possibility. And so plans should be put in place. We're also looking for the district level about, Chromebooks and other kinds of things that would be essential if we were to have to move for a short time into remote learning. Okay, we have a very important presentation this evening. We'll have our audit report. The district audit report will be introduced and presented by David Vigil, our Executive Director of Finance. And then we have two individuals with us this evening, Terry Ogle and Wade King, who are with the Accounting and Financial Solutions audit firm. And of course, they are the ones that conducted the audit. The preliminary findings were presented to the audit committee, but that information is not public until it has been approved by the state auditor's office. It has now been approved by the state auditor and now can be shared with the board and with the community. Just a reminder, we have 2 board members who serve on the audit committee. We also have 1 community representative who is required to have a financial background in, for example, banking, credit unions, or some financial institution. And 1 member is required to have a student who attends school in our district. We have a second presentation this evening, and it's just an overview and the beginning of a discussion on the Rio Rancho Public Schools redistricting for school board seats that will apply in the next school board election 2 years from now. We are all required, all public entities, to redistrict every 10 years following the completion of the census. And so there will be some introductory remarks made by Beth Pendergrass, our Chief Communications Strategy and Engagement Officer. The firm that's we have selected to work with us is Research and Polling, and they have worked with us in the past, and they have just done a wonderful job for us. Their representative will be Michael Sharp, who will discuss with the board some of the processes and procedures for redistricting school board seats. Again, that will apply in 2 years from now. And there will also be an opportunity for public input and comment as well on the redistricting process. We're very pleased to have the city manager for the city of Rio Rancho with us this evening. They will be presenting their bond proposals for the next city election. So we welcome Matt Geisel, the city manager, and he will lead the presentation and share with you what the city is looking at in terms of their bond in their future. Certainly that information is always appreciated and helpful for planning purposes, not only for the city, but also for us. And we really are glad that he's come to share that information with us this evening. We also have a memo of understanding with CNM. A memo of understanding is a non-binding contract with CNM and the district. It focuses on providing more access and opportunity with a particular emphasis in the skilled trades. And of course, the board has made a commitment to purchase a building and to move forward with that. We want to continue to work with CNM as that project moves forward. It is, we certainly have the building. We are still looking to secure adequate funding that is needed for renovations and equipment. We knew that was going to be a challenge in a short session and came up really, right before the session. But we are continuing through our lobbyist, Chris Bolzano, to put that out for our delegation and other legislators to consider. But we are going to have a dedicated revenue stream in New Mexico if we really want the skilled trades to become a reality. And we are also going to need some help in securing funding for renovations. And then, again, I just want to make a plea to our parents and our businesses that I hope that you will be vocal and speak up and advocate for the need for these skilled trades in our community. And not only for our students during the day, but the intent is for that facility to also be available in the evenings for our adult community. So we need your help and support. We need you to write letters to people you know. We need you to be vocal about the need to find secure funding, regular funding for career technical education in New Mexico. And having worked in a couple of other states, they have dedicated revenue stream for these programs. And you've got to have money to do that. You can't take money from your other programs when you're really struggling to keep them afloat as well. It's important for our students, but it's even more important for the economic development of our state. And so we just hear over and over the critical need we have. And so I hope that you will make your feelings known to our delegation, who is very much in support, but also to state leaders and certainly to our legislators in Santa Fe. We have a couple of other short items. The board is being asked to consider approving the award of an RFP, which is a resolicitation for door and hardware maintenance and repair on demand. And our purchasing director, Michael Madrid, will present this item to the board. And then we will also have a second reading of policy 1008, which is student rights and responsibilities. And the changes that the board is considering enacting were necessitated by legislative actions during the 2021 session. In other words, we are required by statute to make these changes to be in compliance with new state laws and regulations. And are there any questions on the second part of that presentation?
If anyone has a question, if you want to just go ahead and raise your hand. You know where your little hand is. Okay. Okay, so with that, I don't think we have any questions.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Cleveland. We appreciate you going through all that and taking the time to discuss some of those things with us. Okay, we will go ahead and move on to our next item, which is to approve the prioritized agenda and proposed time allocations. Anything that needs to change on the agenda as it's been presented? Or a motion?
This is Noreen Scott. I move that we accept the prioritized agenda.
Board Member Jessica Tyler.
Okay, so we have a motion by Noreen Scott and a second by Jessica Tyler. And if we could get a roll call vote on that from Kim.
Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott, Secretary Scott. Okay, don't think so. Board Member Tripp,
Yes.
Board Member Tyler,
Yes.
and President Galbraith.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0.
Okay. Noreen, can you hear us? Can you say something real quick? Make sure that we can still hear you. Nope. Okay. We'll go on to our next. All right. The motion carries. Moving on to our public comment. We received 6 public comments over the last week. Our first one comes from Colleen Maddie, asking that we stop the sale of the property that's adjacent to Mountain View Middle School. She brings attention to us about her and her neighborhood. And she also brings, also talks about the increasing traffic problem that's over there with, that they're having with Mountain View. Or is that? Yes. Okay. And the other schools that are over in that area. We received another public comment from Eric Maddie asking for a link to our virtual school board meetings to give public comment. We received 4 from students within our district, all around similar things. So we received Hannah Smith, Manuel Gomez, and Isabella Balderrana. Those 3 students, they all asked for well, they all brought attention. They were concerned about mask mandates not necessarily being enforced. They're concerned about the lack of staff, that they're having large class sizes due to the lack of staff that we have in the buildings. They all voiced that they would like to have students be able to speak during these board meetings, or at least have their voice, and that we should look at a possible shutdown for our schools. And we also received another student, which was Jasmine Clark Espinosa, and she also talked about those things, but in addition, she asked that we take a look at that policy 1008 and to really consider what's on there and to make sure it's not too broad and that it wouldn't hurt students of color in our district as we go through that tonight. And that is all of our public comment for tonight. If anyone wishes to give public comment to the board, we review those public comments every week and go through them. You can go to our RRPS board page to give that public comment. There is a form there where you can write in and give us that public comment. Gary Tripp, I see your hand is up. We can't talk about the public comments. It's not our agenda, but if you would like to go ahead and ask a question real quick, go ahead.
Yes, Madam President, just a question. And you had mentioned that you had a comment from the last board meeting that you forgot about. I just wanted to make sure you got it on there. Did you?
Thank you. I did.
Yeah.
Yes, that was
Okay.
our first one from calling Maddie. Thank you, because I
Thank
did.
you.
It would have been awful to forget it again this
No.
week. So I appreciate you checking in on that. Thank you. So yeah, with that, if anyone would like to give public comment, please go to our board page and do so. We will now move into our reports, and I know we have a lot of individuals here for reports. We are going to start with our audit report tonight. So we have David Vigil, who's our Executive Director of Finance, also Terry Ogle and Wade King, who are with Accounting and Financial Solutions, who conduct our audit. And so I will hand it over to them.
Thank you, Madam President. This is David Vigil, Executive Director of Finance. I will try and keep my comments brief. And I haven't had the pleasure of working with either Terry or Wade, but I believe that the district has a good working relationship with our auditors and have worked real well in producing unqualified financial reports for the district. And just so that the board knows, the way that I approach an audit is to make sure that we are as transparent as possible in providing all the information to our auditors in a timely manner, and that it's always an opportunity for us to learn about our district and what we're doing well and what we can improve on. So there's always room for improvement. I work on a continuous improvement model. And so I look forward to engaging with our next auditors. But for now, I'd like to go ahead and turn the presentation over to Terry Ogle and Wade King from the Accounting and Financial Solutions Group.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board, staff, and community. This is your exit for your audit of your June 30th, 2021 audit report. And we'll go one slide. The audit report contains 3 opinions. The first opinion is a financial statement opinion, and it is an unmodified opinion. The financial statement opinion is written by the AICPA. Well, all of the opinions are written by the AICPA. And so they look fairly similar as long as you have the same kind. So yours is unmodified, which means there's no modifications or qualifications, and we do not believe that there are any material misstatements in your audit report. The second opinion that we give is on the government auditing standards. It comes in 2 parts, and we're going to get into that in just a minute. And then your third opinion is on your major federal awards, your uniform guidance. So we'll go on to the next slide, please. The unmodified opinion is a clean opinion. The opinion is on the government-wide financial statements, each major fund, and to be a major fund, you have to be 10% of the assets, revenue, assets, liability, revenue, or expenses. It also puts, the opinion is also on the budgetary statement for the general fund. There's also an in relation to opinion in there that has to do with the schedule of federal awards, which is an expenditure driven report, and your other supplemental information, which is your combining schedules on the general fund, the non-major funds, and your schedules required by the state. Next slide, please. In the yellow book, or the government auditing standards opinion, there's two parts. The first part is on internal controls, and there's some sections in there. So the opinion that was rendered is on the effectiveness of the internal controls. And we can have material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. So in material weaknesses, there were no findings issued. And there were two findings that had to do with a significant deficiency. And then the second part of that opinion is on compliance. Did somebody have a question? The second part of that opinion is on compliance, and there's a little bit of two parts. There's the gas opinion, the gas compliance part of it, and then there's the requirements for the New Mexico state law. And there are three findings that have to do with the New Mexico state law. Next slide, please. For the uniform guidance, or the federal awards finding, it also comes in two parts. One's on internal controls over compliance, and the opinion is that there were no findings, the opinion was rendered that your internal controls were effective, or the effectiveness of internal controls. There's no findings on internal controls, although there may still be some that exist. There were none found. And then there's no significant deficiencies in relation to your major programs, and there were no question costs in excess of $25,000 noted. Then we'll get into the findings. And so we'll go on to some definitions here. Next slide, please. So these are the definitions of a material weakness. It has to do with the potential to allow a material weakness. A material weakness has the potential to allow a financial statement error to not be detected or corrected. A material misstatement could cause the financial statements to be misleading to the readers for those financial statements. So it's a higher level of a finding, and it's a standalone finding. So if there was something that was big enough that the financial statements would be materially misstated all by itself, then that would be a material weakness. That doesn't mean that it existed, but it still could be a control issue. The next area is a significant deficiency in internal controls. It's less severe than a material weakness, and it would be a combination of errors that would allow the significant deficiency to happen. It is a combination of controls that have to do with the deficiency, and it could rise to the level of a material weakness. And then there's some other non-compliance matters, and a lot of those have to do with state statutes and regulations. Next slide, please. Then we're going to talk about the prior year findings. There was the resolved ones was the non-program food costs. That's mostly so that you have a reminder of what was resolved and what was not resolved. The prior year findings that were not resolved was internal controls over student activities and the timely completion of the I-9s. Next slide, please. So now the current year findings we're going to go through, and the first finding, which is a significant deficiency, had to do with management overriding controls, and it had to do with payment for services that had not been received. And then there was also a control finding for capital assets. When they were working on the reconciliation of the capital assets, they didn't quite get it correct in the recategorizing of the construction in progress over to the buildings or the items coming out of construction in progress. For the federal awards, there were no findings issued. Then we have the section for the state statutes. So we have internal controls over student activity funds, and that had to do with late deposits not being in the bank within 24 hours and recording of revenue derived from district assets. And then you have the timely completion of the I-9s. And the reason why that one's really important is because the Department of Labor is going out and doing audits, and they are creating a fine for each I-9 that is incorrect. There's a $2,000 fine. And it can be anything from the start date not being complete to the person who reviewed the information didn't sign off. It can be the smallest thing. So that's why that finding, if it's found, we're trying to get all the districts that we audit to recognize that and get those in line, because Department of Labor is not giving any order on that. Then we have the finding for background checks. Background checks should be completed by the first, before they start working for the district. And as of June 14th, 2019, the district is required to perform their own background check and not use the Department of Education's background check. They also are not allowed to use the another entity's background check. So then we're going to get into some financial highlights. Next slide, please. So this has to do, this is a 5-year presentation of your cash. The top line is the general fund, and the bottom line is the other funds that you have. So the general fund, you can see in 2017 you had $45 million, and in 2021 you have $26 million. So you can see how it's gone up and down. And then in the other funds, you can see that you started in 2017 with $4.5 million, and in 2021 you had 14 million. So it just kind of gives you some projection of how those look. Next slide, please. The other thing that happens with the cash is the funds that require a reimbursement. The district is using the general fund to cover those funds. So this kind of tells you how much or how quickly the district is getting their funds from the Department of Education. So as you can see in 2017, the other funds were borrowing from the general fund to the tune of $1.6 million. And in 2019, it actually went up to 3.4. And then in 2021, they really got really fast at the reimbursements, and you were down to 300,000. So it did get quite a bit better for the general fund covering cash. Next slide, please. This is a chart of your revenue and expenditures. The green line, which is the bottom line, is the revenue, and the red line is the expenditures. And that's why your cash is going down, is because you're using some of your cash for expenditures. And in 2020, $45 million of $45.2 million was in capital assets. So that's why capital outlays. So that's why that number is so large, and it jumped up there pretty big. Next slide, please. This is a chart of revenue to per student cost. And so we took the 120-day count in 2020 and 2021. So you did drop 893 students between 2020 and 21. And then your revenue was about the same. So your per student revenue was a little higher in 21 because your students dropped, the per student dropped. And then your expenditures was a little lower. So it lowered a little bit on your revenue, on your expenditures. So we thought that was kind of interesting and that you'd appreciate seeing that. Next slide, please. Then we get into a little bit of information on your capital assets. And the green bar is the actual assets, and the red bar is the accumulated depreciation, and that shows how old basically your assets are. So you have some pretty new assets, and they're not depreciated to their fullest yet. So you're doing a fine job of keeping your capital, your assets regenerating. Next slide, please. Then as far as your long-term debt, you can see that your long-term debt is staying pretty consistent. A lot of that has to do with the refinancing of the debt. And the top square is the current portion. So as you can see across there, the current portion that you paid from year to year was about 15 million, and you're maintaining about 105 million in debt overall. Next slide, please. Then we get to your pension liabilities and your OPEB liabilities. The first chart to the left is the pension liabilities. There is more information on the pension liabilities because that has been in effect for a longer period of time. But from 2017, you had your pension liability was 218 million. And as of 2021, your pension liability increased to 646 million. For your OPEB liabilities, you didn't have quite as big of a swing. From 2018, you were at 91 million. And in 2021, you're at 96 million. Next slide, please. So now we have a summary of the things that happened. The district appears to be operating well. Improvements are being made to resolve your findings. The cash balances were improved from the prior year. The expenditures reimbursements were more timely. I kind of showed that for PED. PED reimbursed your funds at a quicker pace. The pension costs have increased and will continue to increase, and the district is going to have to increase their portion that they have to pay in. In 2021, you were paying in 14.15. In 2022, you're going to have to pay in 15.15. And in 2023, you have to pay in 16.15. So they are increasing that to try to get the pension liabilities down. The other thing that happened this year was GASB 84 was implemented. The district, Arlene, Heather, Amy, everybody worked really hard on getting it implemented, and it was done, and it was an awesome job. They worked really hard on it, and it was something that they worked on for pretty much the whole year. Everyone in the district was very helpful and knowledgeable, and we really appreciated working with them. And we do realize that the COVID did make the audit a little more difficult for everybody. Any questions for me?
Well, first, thank you for presenting. I'm feeding back on your computer. I don't know if you want to mute while each question comes in, just in case it feeds back. I don't know. But we'll go over to, we'll start with Noreen Scott. Noreen Scott, do you have any questions or comments?
I do not. I really appreciate the clarity of the presentation, and having served on the audit committee, I've heard a lot of this before, so I'm satisfied. I guess I do have one question on the findings that you have. You will then respond to our ability to clear those findings up in next year's audit. Is that correct?
Okay, so we're not required to, you have to go out for RFP this year. So whoever is your auditor will look at that and verify those.
Thank you.
If whoever is the auditor is required to look at any prior year findings and evaluate whether or not they have been corrected. So whoever does the audit next year, whether it's us or if you decide to change, they are required to look at that.
Awesome. Noreen, anything else?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll go over to Jeffrey Morgan.
No questions. Again, thanks for the information. Greatly appreciate it.
You and Jessica Tyler.
I don't have any questions at this time.
Okay,
I
thanks.
will want to see, kind of our follow-up actions as to their findings. So I'll want to keep an eye on that, but no questions for the company that completed the audit.
Okay, thank you. And Gary Tripp.
I think, Madam President, I have two questions. One for, but I think they may both pertain to Dr. Cleveland or Mike Baker or Mr. V. Hill. Under the deficiencies, I noticed that a month ago we had a report about the new software system, and I was wondering if that was one of the reasons why is because it tightens up the student activity funds, and I noticed some of that stuff in the audit. So I was wondering if that was a correlation or not.
I see David's on. David, you want to answer that? David V. Hill.
Madam President, Board Member Tripp, yes. So the part of the corrective action plan on both the fixed assets finding and the activity accounts finding will be addressed through the transition or the move over to the new financial accounting software, which will allow us to track both fixed assets and activity funds. And the changes that were made with the activity funds under GASB 84 requirements, those will be implemented with the new software.
Thank you. And then, Dr. Cleveland, I don't know if we've heard anything yet. I know the legislative session, but with the 893 drop in students, does it look like the legislator is going to hold harmless on the legislative initiatives with that? Because that could be getting close to 1%, right?
Dr. Cleveland, you're muted, I think.
Darn it, I am muted. So I put $1 in the kitty every time I do that. And so yes, we'll know more at the end of the session. It's not to, exactly how that's all going to shake out. We're hoping to reach our 1%. And we probably will be able to do that. We do still need to hold harmless. I mean, it's really important that we have that. There's just so many variables that are impacting our budget this year. So hopefully that will be the case. Could I just add one other comment real quickly? When we have a situation where, and we've dealt with that situation where someone signs for something before they receive it, that's just simply not acceptable to do. But the one thing I guess I would like, and certainly the auditor would correct that if I'm incorrect in it, but nobody benefited personally, financially from that. And so there was a mistake. It was the wrong thing to do, and that's been dealt with. And we will continue to work to remind our staff not to do that. But I think it's important for the board to know that nobody benefited from it in any way.
Gary, you have anything else?
Madam President, just to stress, if there's any parents or community members out there that are legislators, hopefully, I'm sure they're very busy and not listening, but that hold harmless is going to be important to the public school districts in the state of New Mexico. And I think it's just got to be a top priority that we look at as school boards and everybody else as citizens with children in public schools. So just a personal comment on that.
And I just add one more thing about that. Transportation is one of those areas that's critical. You all see what's happened with transportation this year. And yet you still have to have your buses, you have to have fuel, you have to have drivers, you have to pay drivers and all of that. And that's another area in addition to general operations transportation is absolutely must be held harmless, or we're going to really have some challenges financially. But thank you for making those comments, because you're exactly right. It's really important to us, all of us.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else from the board? Is there any other further questions? Jessica, Tyler, did you want to ask anything, since we do have Dr. Cleveland and like David B. Hill on? Did you have anything else?
No. Thank
Okay.
you, ma'am.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Terry and Wade, for coming out and for doing our audit report. I couldn't think of the word, but thank you so much. We appreciate you. It's been really nice working with you this last year and the year before. So thank you.
You're welcome, and have a good evening, and we hope to see you next year.
Thank you.
Madam President, I'd just like to say one more thing, and that
Yes,
is
please.
we do thank the auditors for their working closely with the district, and they have worked very hard with us and really made an effort to help us be better, that whole continuous improvement thing. And so I just want to thank them for the work that they did.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for doing that. Okay, so our next report, we will be talking about the redistricting overview, the board redistricting overview. So we have Beth Pendergrass. She'll start, our Chief Communications Strategy and Engagement Officer. And then we also have Michael Sharp from Research and Polling on with us tonight. We'll hand it over to Beth.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam President Galbraith, Dr. Cleveland, and members of the school board. Again, this is Beth Pendergrass, Chief Communications Strategy and Engagement Officer for Rio Rancho Public Schools. As Dr. Cleveland mentioned in her opening remarks, we are here this evening to talk about redistricting our school board boundaries and not our school boundaries. I always want to make that clear, because one seems to be a little more controversial than others, and parents don't like to have their school boundaries changed. So this is for board member districts. As a reminder, school districts that elect their board members via single member districts are required to redistrict every 10 years after the release of the U.S. Census population data. The data was released this past fall, so it's time for us to complete our redistricting process. Research and Polling has managed this process for us in the past, and they have decades of experience in redistricting school districts and other government entities. We'll be using them once again to navigate the process for us. So with that, we do have with us this evening Mr. Michael Sharp. He's the Vice President of Research and Polling, and he is going to speak with the board this evening a little bit about redistricting and the process. So I would like to turn it over to Mr. Michael Sharp. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Hopefully you can hear me, and I'm unmuted myself. And so thank you very much for having this evening, that kind introduction. My name is Michael Sharp with Research and Polling. We've been, that's the cover slide, I guess, but the next slide will just show you just really quick. We have a lot of experience with respect to our staff. I think we first started in Rio Rancho when it was first split off from Jemez Valley and APS back in the mid-90s. And so we've been fortunate enough to assist the school district in the 90s and in 2002 and then 2012 after the census is back then and again this year. And so we hope that we'll be able to answer any questions you have. And we also have worked on the Rio Rancho City Council. And so a little bit of experience in the area. So hopefully you can, again, answer any questions that you have. And so I wanted to go briefly over just the concepts of redistricting, just give you a general overview of kind of what is redistricting and who does it. And so one of the things that people ask is, well, how much influence do other entities have over the school board districts? And so it's always good to just get an idea of, you have your legislative districts, you have county commissions, you have city councils and commissions, and who's responsible for those districts when they're redistricted. And on this slide, you can see that the U.S. House of Representatives, or U.S. Congress, the state legislative bodies, the House and the Senate, as well as the PEC, those are both all the responsibilities of the state legislature and the governor. We just went through that process through a special session I guess a month ago in December. And then the county commissions, they also redistricted last year. They're responsible for their own city councils and city commissions, depends on the election cycle that they participate in. Rancho has had their election in March, so they actually redistricted last year, whereas other cities redistrict this year, the same as the school boards. So the school boards are required by law to redistrict in the calendar year following the release of the census data. So that is in there by statute. Somebody may say, well, geez, you had your election in November of 21. That in normal census years, the data would have been released in March. And people may ask, well, 10 years ago, why can't you redistrict prior to the elections in 2000? I guess it would be 31. But the law says you must redistrict as a school board in the calendar year following the release of the census data. So the census data was released in 2021. So you are required by law to redistrict in 2022. This is the responsibility of the school board. No one else has any authority over what your districts look like. So the legislature can't tell you what your districts look like, city council, county commissions, and so on. So it's just a quick idea of who redistricts in general. So it's up to the school board. So what is redistricting? It's basically just redrawing the lines such that when you're finished, when you determine your boundaries, you know which folks are represented by which board members. And this is dictated by a number of different things. And the one that is most applicable to Rancho Public Schools is that it is dictated by statute. Statute says that if a school district has greater than 16,000 people, according to the most recent census, then you must redistrict. Well, Rancho Public Schools has over 105,000 people, so I think you easily exceed that threshold. So if you can meet that threshold, though if you're lucky, you might not actually have to redistrict if the population change was equally distributed throughout the city. If your city grew by about, or school district grew by about 16%, if every single of your existing board districts grew by 16% as well, you may not have to redistrict. So a lot of times it's due to statute as well as to the distribution of that change over the past 10 years. You know that within the school district, you have had some parts of the area grow more quickly than other areas due to new construction and so on. And so those districts will tend to be overpopulated and will have to change. So we just talked about when we redistrict, and we have to use the most current population data available. The census does produce estimates, but they're not at the level we need to do any sort of redistricting. And so the decennial census is the most accurate data that we have, and it's the one that we're required by law to use. So I'm going to go over principles of redistricting. There are 5 basic ones. I like to call the first 4, I guess, your picture frame. If redistricting is the process of creating a picture or or a piece of art or whatever happens to be, and it's bounded by 4 sides by a frame, you have to have a pretty solid frame to have your picture in the middle be solid. So the first 4 criteria, equal population, minority voting rights, compactness, and contiguity, are the principles that have been guided by statute or court cases. And so those kind of make up our frame. And then the communities of interest is everything else. And that kind of determines what it looks like inside the frame. And so the next one we'll look at will just be, in terms of equal population, who gets counted. And so on the next slide, we'll have who gets counted. And really briefly, it's everybody. The long form would be it's adults, kids, citizens, non-citizens, college students in the dorms. Everybody is counted by the census officially, no matter what your status is or your age. And then in terms of where folks are counted, it's where you live and sleep most of the time. So if you have children going to New Mexico State or even UNM, they would be counted at the dorms, assuming they're not living at home, physically living at home while going to school. So it's where you live and sleep most of the time. So constitutional mandate to redistrict a number of court cases that just set forth the concept of one person, one vote, or equal population means equal representation, such that no matter where you live throughout the school district, you have the same representation as anybody else. The board member who represents you represents roughly the same number of people as some other board member in a different part of the school district. In this past process for congressional redistricting, the districts have to be as equal as possible or as practicable. So I think the districts were, within plus or minus 50 people or 100 people or less than 0.01%. But the courts have said, well, for smaller entities or entities that's not Congress, including school boards, the districts are considered equal if their deviation population is no more than 10%. We'll get into that definition in a moment. But basically it means that the deviation should be no more than plus or minus 5% from the ideal population, which is on the next slide. And so how do we figure out that ideal population? How do we figure out what that equal population should be? So you take the school district's total population, 105,966. And by the way, that's a 16% increase, almost 16% from 10 years ago. You take that 105,966 divide by 5, the number of board districts. And so in a perfect world, every district would be 21,193 people. Remember I mentioned the deviation. The courts have said, well, unlike Congress, with respect to, say, school boards, the districts can be substantially equal. They don't have to be perfectly equal in population. You take that 21,193 people, and you can go above or below that by 5%. In fact, it's in state statute that in order to be considered equal population, you have to stay within plus or minus 5% of that ideal population. So that gives us a range. You take your 21,193 plus or minus 1,059, which is that 5%. And if every district is between 20,134 and 22,252, then they're considered equal in population. The nice thing about having this leeway is it can allow us to keep some neighborhoods together while drawing the districts, or keep some developments or communities together. If the districts had to be perfectly equal in population, we might have to split more communities. Another question that comes up is, when you're drawing the districts, are they based on population or registered voters? The answer is it's based on total population, so everybody who was counted in the decennial census. Okay, the next one is minority voting strength. And in essence, it means that when you have ethnic or language minority groups, you must allow them an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. And within New Mexico, the communities that have a population that's large enough and compact enough would be the Hispanic and Native American communities, where we were able to draw majority Native American and majority Hispanic districts throughout the state of New Mexico. The African American population is sizable within the state and within the community, but the population isn't large enough such that you could create a majority district of African American folks. We need to consider this. We need to provide the opportunity, but we can't use race or ethnicity as the only criteria subordinating other principles, such as the equal population or the other two we'll mention in a moment. The interesting thing about Rio Rancho is that while the school district is about 40% Hispanic, that Hispanic population is evenly distributed. And there's no way to create a majority Hispanic district within Rio Rancho. It's fairly unique. It's interesting. So I just wanted to make sure that folks understand that while the district is 40% Hispanic, roughly, that it just isn't possible to create a majority Hispanic district within the school district. Okay, the third side of our picture frame is compactness. A lot of different ways to measure it. But basically, it's just a matter of if it looks compact, it probably is. It refers to the shape of the district as opposed to the geographic size. So if you ever see maps of the legislative districts for the state of New Mexico, you'll notice that a district in Albuquerque is relatively small compared to a district in northeastern New Mexico that stretches from, Oklahoma all the way down to Clovis, a couple hundred miles, but that's just what it takes to get the number of people every district needed. So it's one question that comes up is why does the questioner's opinion is, why does the district not compact when it's really just the shape? It doesn't really matter how big it is. It's just the shape that matters really. The next one is it can be affected by irregular outer boundaries for Rancho public schools. That's not really much of an issue. So we tend to look at the inner boundaries between districts. So some quick examples. These are all from 91, but I just wanted to make it apples to apples. So we have New Mexico's 3rd Congressional in 91. That's relatively compact. That's northern New Mexico down to about Clovis on the southeastern part. And then the two on the right are two districts that you would say are not compact. The one on the upper right is Houston, and the district in green, that is one district, and with really, really narrow slivers that connect every piece to each other. The one below is North Carolina. That was both of these were created to maximize the number of minority districts, but the Supreme Court said it violated the redistricting, other traditional redistricting principles, and said they were unconstitutional. So when we're drawing districts, we'll make sure they're compact, more like New Mexico's 3rd, as it existed prior to this past year, and as opposed to the ones in North Carolina or Texas. So the fourth side of our frame is contiguity. Can't have any islands. Every district has to be made up of one piece and not two or more. So the one on the left, all the districts are contiguous. The figure on the right, you'll see that District A is in two pieces, so it's not contiguous. For that particular test, I like to say, when you look at a map and you put your pencil on a district, you have to get to every other part of the district without lifting up your pencil. Okay, so finally, we have the legal and constitutional requirements. Now we get to what are called communities of interest. And really, this is what I think generates a lot of the discussion. Once we know or meet the other criteria, how do we actually draw the districts? And a lot of different things that we can look at. We can look at political subdivisions, for example, precincts, don't split precincts. You can look at existing neighborhoods, communities, developments, geographic boundaries, major arroyos, Highway 528, whatever it happens to be. You can look at existing districts. So do you want the districts to be similar to what you have today, or would you prefer to see something different? You can look at where the existing board members currently reside, such that when you're finished with redistricting, there's still one board member per district. It's certainly possible, and it has happened in the past, where incumbents have been, I guess, paired in a single district after redistricting. So there's two, say, board members or city councilors or whatever happens to be within the same district. And so one thing that you could look at is how important is that? You can look at avoiding the pairing of board members if you so choose, but you don't have to. And we can look at all of these communities of interest as long as they don't violate the previous redistricting principles. And so these communities of interest, you can consider them all, and you also find out that they may conflict. You may want to keep communities together, but on the other hand, in order to make districts which are equal in population, you might actually have to split a development. And so there's lots of kind of a give and take and a balancing act in terms of trying to balance the communities of interest as well as meeting the other redistricting principles. So none of the plans are perfect. We don't have any plans tonight. So this is an introductory kind of intro to the process. And when you do see the plans, just remember that no single district is a vacuum in and of itself. And if you see a plan and you say, well, Michael, would you like to, or not would you like to, could you look at, making a change between districts 1 and 5 or whatever it happens to be, that we have to know that whatever change you make to one district, it will impact at least one other. It may cause a domino effect. You might go from District 1 to 5 to 3 to 4, and one change might necessitate 5 or 6 others. And so that's one thing to keep in mind. As mentioned earlier, a lot of different factors to consider, and that sometimes they work against each other. And so that's one of the reasons why these plans are rarely ever perfect. There's almost always something about a plan which isn't necessarily ideal. When you do see the plans, none are necessarily set in stone. They're examples of what could be done. You may find that you really like 1 or 2 of them, and that's fine too, but we can also modify them as long as those modifications still meet the requirements, and they're intended to initiate discussion. So with respect to the redistricting process itself, we're going over the ABCs of redistricting right now. In subsequent meetings, we can condense this presentation so a little bit shorter, since we've heard it once in a little bit more detail. We'll get public input as well as input from the board. We'll be showing plans, getting the input. If we need to modify the plans based on the input, we can do that and present those plans at subsequent meetings. And eventually, a redistricting plan will be adopted. Once it's adopted, then we send a lot of information to school administration as well as the county clerk's office, where they will then go through the process of assigning voters to the correct districts in preparation for resolutions and finally dates, and then finally the election. And these districts will take effect for the first time for the election coming up in November of 2023. So that's the first for the districts that are up for election in November of next year. Okay, so you have current districts, obviously. And so I thought it would be good to give you an idea of where you are right now. And so we talked about population change. And so the school district has grown by about 16%, just under 16%. And if you remember on one of the previous slides, redistricting can be required if that distribution of that population growth is not equal throughout the district or throughout the school district. And so the first column, 2010 is population 10 years ago, 2020 is just released, change in raw numbers, and then the percent change is really what we're looking at. Any district that grew at a different rate than the school district as a whole. So school district grew at 15.9%. Let's take District 1, for example. It grew at 28%. It grew faster than the district as a whole. So you would expect that District 1 would have too many people, that it might have to shrink. District 2 is a little bit less. It may or may not have to add people. District 3 grew much faster than the school district as a whole. So you would expect that it would have to lose population because it's too big. District 4 did not keep pace with the school district as a whole. That's District 4 is in a spot of town that really doesn't have much room for additional development. So it's kind of landlocked, if you will, not very much infill. And then District 5 is pretty close to the school district's rate of growth as well. So it might be very close to where it needs to be. So on the next slide is just a quick map of your districts, and then in the table. So we saw the growth rates. Well, here's actually the population of each district again, but this time how far away from the ideal population. Remember, the ideal was 21,100 roughly, and you can see that yes, District 1 is about 2,000 people above the ideal. That's the deviation column, and it's about 9% above where it needs to be. Every district has to be within plus or minus 5%. So we can see the District 1, it will need to reduce in population. I'll have to shed some population. District 2 is at negative 3.7. It's within plus or minus 5%. So theoretically, it wouldn't necessarily have to change. District 3 is a little bit above the ideal population as well by 9%. So it has too many people have to shrink. District 4 is, like I said, it's the one really hasn't had much growth, and so it didn't keep pace with the rest of the school district. And so its deviation is 3,000 below the ideal, and it's low by almost 15%, so negative 14.8. and then District 5 is almost right on. And so when we kind of look at where these districts are located, if you look at say districts 2 and 5 in the northern and central part of the school district, theoretically, you might be able to leave those 2 alone. And then since District 4 has to expand, and Districts 1 and 3 need to shrink, one potential option, just by the way, is you can take District 4 into District 1 and District 4 into District 3, and it accomplishes evening out the population for those 3 districts just by working with Districts 1, 3, and 4. So that's probably an option that we'll look at. But I just wanted to show this just so you could see the implications and the population pattern that occurred throughout the city. Districts 1 and 3 have to shrink. District 4 has to grow, and potentially 2 and 5 don't need to change at all. But one thing I do like to remember, at least for myself, is these districts were created or adopted by the board 10 years ago. The board today may have different priorities and different ways of looking at things, and so just because a district is already within plus or minus 5%, it doesn't mean it's not going to change or it doesn't need to change. So I think on the next slide, which is the last one, this is just the population table for all the districts. It has total population in the white row, and then the adult population in the gray row. And I guess the important part of this is I mentioned earlier about the percent Hispanic, and that bottom row, it shows you under the Hispanic column that it's 42% Hispanic total population and 38% adult Hispanic for the school district as a whole. But then if you look at the Hispanic population for each of the districts, they're all within 34 to 42% adult Hispanic. If you actually looked at that distribution throughout the school district, it would be relatively even separate. I don't think there's any part within the very few parts that even neighborhoods or communities or blocks that are even greater than 50% Hispanic. So I found that pretty interesting because it's pretty unique with respect to the Rio Rancho community. And so I believe that's the last slide of note, and I'm open for any questions that you may have. I know it's a lot of info, but I'll try to answer them as best as I can. Thank you.
All right. Well, first I want to say thank you. That was actually really, really helpful to look through all those. And I loved seeing all the numbers and just how we've grown. I've grown up in the city, so it was really interesting to see the growth that's taken place here. So thank you for that presentation and pulling all those things together. Before I go over to the board for other questions, I just want to go over to Dr. Cleveland really quick and see if she has anything, and then we'll go to the board for questions.
No, I really don't, but thank you, Michael. It's really helpful, and it's a really interesting process. As you go through it, I think you'll find it very interesting, and you do learn a lot about the district. And one just really kind of quick aside is that our population is, I think it's 40% Hispanic, but our children are in our district, 55% Hispanic. So I think that's an interesting, that has interesting repercussions. It shows the number of young children that we have from our Hispanic populations. And I assume that our Native American, though it's an important part of our district, we now have 2,000 that claim some Native heritage, about 1,000 fully certified, is not a large enough group to have a particularly big impact on our district.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Yeah, it's just so interesting to look at all those things. So thank you. All right, we'll go over to our board for questions. Start with Noreen Scott, who has her hand raised. Go ahead, Noreen.
Yes, my question is, of the 5 items that you listed, does anyone carry more weight than the other? Equal population, minority voting rates. Is there one that you have to be sure that it's got priority?
Madam President, Board Member Scott, I'd say the population is the most important one.
Okay.
No matter what, every district must be within plus or minus 5% of that ideal population, no matter what. And then the others are required by law or constitutional. If you can make them, contiguity has to be accomplished. You can't really have a district in, in New Mexico. You can have a part of a district in Clayton and another part in Lordsburg. So, and the others are the voting rights. We would create districts if we could, but we can't. And compactness, I think we do our best to make districts that are reasonably compact.
Thank you. And thank you. The statistics were very interesting, and it makes me very proud of our community. We're really an open community that welcomes folks, and that makes me feel good.
All right. Jeffrey Morgan, any questions, comments?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I was going to ask, how was it counted? It's based off population, not voted on. That was very, very good information. I love numbers, love to see statistics, different things like that. So good to see. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jessica Tyler?
No questions, but I look forward to the process, and thank you for your presentation. It was very informative.
And Gary Tripp?
Madam President, Michael, thank you. It was really a quality presentation, and I thank you for that. One thing that interests me is the fact that I look outside District 1 and I continuously see about 400 homes that are just a foundation is laid. So by the time the redistricting process gets done, I kind of wonder how big some of these districts are going to get, even after we balance them for a whole decade. But it's great. I look forward to the process. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. That's the best part about Rio Rancho, right? It's ever changing.
Yeah.
It's ever changing. That was a great 16% population growth. So that's awesome. Beth, did you have anything before we go on? Just want to make sure. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Michael. And if there's anything else that you want to add before you go tonight, we just appreciate you coming out tonight and being patient with us. So,
well, thank you very much for the opportunity. It should be an interesting process. Just FYI, 10 years ago when Rio Rancho went through redistricting, 10 years ago, they had deviations just because, I like numbers too, but there were some districts that were 65% above where they needed to be, and ones that were 26% below where they needed to be. So 10 years prior, there was a ton of growth, a lot of growth, from 2010 to 20, but while you change, you didn't quite change as drastically as you did for the previous redistricting. I thought that was interesting. So if you'd ever want to see those numbers, let me know.
Ah, that's awesome. All right.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Very much.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us tonight. Okay, and now we'll go to our last report, and I want to thank Matt Geisel for being super patient with us. I thought we'd get to him much sooner than we did, and so thank you for being on with us. So, this is the city of Rio Rancho. The worst thing that can happen is when you go into vote and you have no idea what any of the bonds are, anything that's on there, and you're terrified. So we're really grateful that he's come out tonight to help us to just for everyone in the city. I hope everyone can kind of watch this to get an idea of what will be on the ballot this time. So this is Matt Geisel, with our Rio Rancho City Manager.
Madam President, members of the school board, thank you very much. Learned a lot of things this evening, and cleaned up some emails as well. So it's been a good listening in for the last however long it's been. But thank you for the opportunity to come provide a little bit of information about our upcoming March 1 election. Interesting to hear Michael Sharp talk, because he did this work for us in the fall, and now we're seeing the implementation of that. Next slide, please. So in this next election, here on March 1, the city of Rio Rancho is not part of the consolidated elections. We kind of have several items on the ballot, and I'll talk mainly about the bonds and one of our permanent fund questions. But we have on citywide election, we'll have the mayor, the municipal judge, and then 3 of our city councilors are up for re-election in districts 2, 3, and 5. On the ballot, we'll also have a public safety bond, a road bond, and for the first time ever, a quality of life facilities bond. and 6 charter amendment questions, one of which would be to establish a permanent fund. As I get into the bond questions, I want to emphasize there will be no change in the tax rate or the mill levy rate on these bonds. So it's one of the questions we get is that we're not going to have a tax increase, but we're adding a bond. And that's because, as you heard Michael talk about, we've had growth in Rio Rancho. Therefore, the property tax base in Rio Rancho is expanding, holding that same mill levy for debt service at 2.77, just will generate and yield more dollars. I'm really here to educate. Not here to talk about, a certain direction or encourage you to vote one way or another, but really just to educate and just stress the importance of getting out there, learning a little bit more. You can find a lot of the information I'm going to talk about tonight at rrnm.gov/RR votes. Once again, the city's main website of rrnm.gov /RR votes. Next slide, please. So the GeoBond road question, this would be our 4th general obligation road bond. As you guys know, that the city of Rio Rancho is nearly 40 years old. And it wasn't until about 8 years ago or so that the city really started to implement a concerted recurring effort to address the conditions of our roads and improve the roads through reconstruction, reinvestment in those. The question is, about $10 million in general obligation bonds. And again, if it was approved, there would be no property tax increase. As I mentioned, we had a bond in 2009, then there was a hiatus for a few years, and then in the last 3 cycles, 2016, 18, and 20. Next slide, please. You can see a list of the projects here, and they're spread across the city. Also, in conjunction with the road work, we do utility, water and sewer work, and that is funded outside of the GEO bond, comes from the utility fund, which is an enterprise fund here at the city. Obviously, you don't want to repair a road and then have a pipe break underneath it, and then all that works for naught. So that's why we do the utility work at the same time once we have the road ripped up. The proposed projects, Enchanted Hills Boulevard for 528 to the bridge of Paseo del Volcan, Northern Boulevard 528 to Rockaway, 19th Ave, which goes from Golf Course to 528. So you think about the road from all the folks who moved from Idaho to take a job with Intel, who live in Cabazon. That's the road that they cut through. It's the Intel shortcut, as I call it. Quantum, right there at New Mexico 528 Northern Boulevard. When we go out to bid for Quantum, we will add, and I'm not sure if your finance and purchasing folks are still on, but we'll add an adult to see if we could do Vortex and Laser as part of those projects as well. So the focus is Quantum, and then sometimes we do these add alternatives to see if we can do a little bit more based on the total cost. But excited to kind of get into right where you guys are located from the district office and very important economic development area of the city. And then Spring Drive, which is over just east of Unser Boulevard. And again, we'll do the utilities underneath these. Next slide, please. We have would be the 3rd time if it passes a general obligation bond for public safety. The first time this was 2018, and then in 2020 again there would be no property tax increase. This is to provide the definition here: designing, construction, repairing, preserving, rehabilitating equipment and facilities for public safety. And I believe I have a list of the items here on the next slide, please. Replacement of police vehicles. Our vehicles for both police and fire get high mileage pretty fast here in Rio Rancho because we have a large geographical area, as you know from your transportation side of the school district. Replacement of a crime scene vehicle, rescue response vehicle, equipment and vehicle replacement, just again upgrading our equipment and our apparatus, and then some improvements to police headquarters. Next slide, please. And then, as I mentioned, for the first time, a quality of facilities, quality of life facilities bond. This is about $1 million. This is the first time, and again, because of the expansion of the tax base, we are able to ask the voters to consider adding a new bond so we can, again, just like we did on the roads and public safety, start to reinvest and have a consistent funding stream for future needs. And as you'll see on the next slide, we're really proposing reinvestment in some of the older parks in Rio Rancho, some of the older neighborhoods, upgrading their playground equipment, bringing them into ADA compliance, as well as supporting our library with materials and equipment, about $1 million on this one. Next slide, please. So the city charter is essentially our constitution in local government. And per the charter, every 6 years, we have a charter review committee that combined of elected members of the governing body, sitting members of the governing body, as well as citizens. They review the charter, discuss opportunities for updating, refinement, things of that sort, bring it before the governing body for the governing body's consideration on whether that would be then sent to the voters. So we have a series of 6 questions. Many of them are kind of technical, a little wonky, and clean up. But a big one that we have, and next slide. These are the questions here. Now let's run through these and just little, again, a little boring and a little technical and wonky, but amend it the charter review process from every 6 years to 8 years. Granted, a charter review can be called at any time, but that'll just extend out the time frame for review. And then also to provide a little bit more of a runway for, shall the city of Rio Rancho charter be amended to require that a qualified successor be appointed to fill a vacancy in the office of the mayor or the office of the city council within 60 days of the vacancy instead of 45. That's just to create a little bit more runway to find interested applicants, go through the process, and then get it scheduled. Sometimes it's just based on how the calendar falls, not even technically possible within 45. Updating the process for recording and codifying our ordinances, and then language about how to assign a salary to an acting city manager in the event there's an acting city manager. Next slide. And then same thing on a little more time frame for the mayor to bring forward an appointment on a board or a commission. Current language is 30 days. Sometimes after 30 days, we still have 0 applicants who have submitted. So this is the change it to as soon as practical. And then the last question we have here and for those of us, who work in local government, in public service, I think one of the things that we all know is, especially, we have challenges with our budget, high expectations and high expectations, and always it seems like the dollars just don't go far enough. And we have a really unique opportunity that we want to propose to the voters is to create a permanent fund. And I believe my former colleague at the state of New Mexico, Mr. Hatch, is on the phone, and state of New Mexico relies very heavily on permanent funds to fund its operations. As we've heard in the national media as well as locally, COVID, I think we all thought it was, we had the first 6 months slammed on the brakes on our economy, but in general, the first ring cities, suburbs have done better financially during COVID compared to urban cores. And it's a combination of internet gross receipts tax, people working from home, construction boom, and just the overall rising economy that we've seen for the last several months. Or several years. Next slide. So the opportunity here would be to, again, to create this permanent fund. Sometimes people know permanent funds as endowments or trust funds. It's a savings account with a lock around it, where we would take $10 million in one-time revenue, because really this is one-time windfall revenue that's come through the construction boom and things of that sort, and set it aside for investment. And then the investment returns that are generated off the principal investment would then be flowed back into the city. At a staff level, we would propose a 50-50 split on 50% of the investment earnings reinvested, 50% back into the general fund to fund governmental services. Next slide, please. Just to kind of visualize this and the impact. And one of the ways I think about the permanent fund is also, we have this one-time revenue, and we hear different stories about if you ever won the lottery, the first thing you should do is put it in the bank and not spend it for a year. Get it to where it starts. Spend the earnings, the investment earnings, or if you're fortunate enough to be an athlete and and get drafted and get a big signing bonus. Same thing. Don't change your lifestyle for a year. Start saving it and then spend the investment earnings down the road. Because once you spend it, it's gone. And I think we also have heard all those stories about the athletes who get the big signing bonus and then they're homeless 10 years later. So, you know, and so again, the premise here, and this is modeled on about a 6.5% return over 25 years. And you could see that, you know, as the years go, we start to increase the principal of the investment account, as will generate additional money for governmental services. And you can see that as, you know, the principal growing and on the middle column, and then the amount of money it would throw off on a yearly basis, obviously subject to some market fluctuations because interest rates go up, interest rates go down, etc. Next slide. So I just, you know, want to talk, one of the questions we get in this is, you know, because this is a really unique once in a lifetime, you know, proposition for Rio Rancho, all of Rio Rancho. And we appreciate the opportunity to talk to you this evening about this unique election before us, in addition to the bonds is, you know, people say, well, why don't you take that $10 million and, you know, and repair my residential street right in front of my house? Or why don't you use that and fix this road? Or why don't you do you know, why don't you do the rest of Southern Boulevard? And we get, you know, questions like that. And, you know, one of the things is $10 million. And I think you all know this because you deal with budgets. $10 million goes really, really fast. And once you spend it, again, it's gone. And just to put in the context is, how far would $10 million go if we were to spend it all at once? You know, historically, our cost estimate for reconstructing a mile of residential road has been about $1 million. With cost escalation and current bids, it's pushing upwards of a 1.5. So we could somewhere reconstruct between 7 and 10 miles of residential road. Again, so once that's done, it's gone. And how do we pick 10 miles when we have 300 miles of residential road across the city? To reconstruct and widen Unser Boulevard from Cherry to PDV, that segment where it goes from 4 lanes down to 2 back to 4, just the roadway in its current configuration would be a little over $11 million. Once you add in right-of-way acquisition and everything else and drainage, it would be about $16-17 million. Doesn't even get us close. Rainbow Boulevard, a project just on the roadway alone, is $2 million. We're doing that project. We started today. That's about a $3.7 million project once we add in right turn lanes and drainage improvements and things of that sort. So the 10 can go really, really fast vis-a-vis, you know, conserving that nest egg for a long haul. Next slide. And I think one of the things too, just to put again this unique opportunity in context, and you know, one of the questions we get is just, let's just grow our economy. And I know Noreen's on here, and she's done a lot of economic development in her career as well. But what would it take, you know, through year 13? Year 13 is about the year when we've generated 10 million, you know, estimated or forecasted $10 million in investment earnings. That's a little over $833,000 would be the average through year 13. For us to generate $833,000 in new gross receipts tax revenue to the city's coffers, we would need to add about $28 million in annual recurring gross receipts taxable economic activity inside municipal boundaries. So what is $28 million in taxable economic activity, gross receipts taxable economic activity in our boundaries? That's the average taxable expenditure of 2,400 Rio Rancho households, somewhere between 8 to 19 new eateries, 884 incremental single-family residential permits, or 232,000 new online orders now that we have internet gross receipts tax. So it takes a lot to add that much economic activity into our community. And that's with all those consumer data, I share that consumer spend data, that's presuming there is no cannibalization, no leakage down to down the hill, if you will. Next slide. So just early voting in election day voting, lots of places. Easiest way to remember this is February 1 is when it starts. Election day is March 1. Please visit rrnm.gov/RR votes to check those on election day. And I think the next slide just says thank you. Sorry about that. We do have some public information events. You guys have already kind of heard a version of our public information right here. But we do have some events coming up today. We are actually at Pinon Coffee handing out informational flyers. We're going to be at a couple of local eateries doing some online things as well. And if I'm not mistaken, the next slide says thank you. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for coming out. And before you go, can I just make sure no one has any questions or anything for you? Let me go. Actually, Dr. Cleveland, did you want to ask anything with this to the city as they're here?
No, but thank you so much for coming and sharing that information with us. It was really informative.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having the city.
Oh, thank you. Gary Tripp, do you have any questions or comments?
No questions. Just thank you, Matt. I appreciate it very much.
Good to see you, Gary.
And Jeffrey Morgan?
No questions. Very good information. Thank you.
Okay. Jessica Tyler?
Madam President, no, thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate the information.
Good to see you.
And Noreen Scott?
Thank you very much, Matt. It was a great presentation, and having worked on the city's bonds before, I know how hard your job is right now, and I thank you for putting the energy into it.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you. We just really appreciate you. Like I said, I hate when I go in there and I don't know everything. So I love this presentation. It's going to be something for me to refer to. So appreciate you coming out and putting it together.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So moving into our to item H, we're going to approve our consent agenda. Are there any questions or discussion on that? Or if not, we can go to a motion.
This is
Madam
Noreen
President?
Scott. I move to approve the consent agenda.
Madam President, I have a quick question.
Yes.
The consent agenda includes conference requests. I didn't see that we actually had any today, so I just wanted the record to reflect that there were no conference requests included in the consent agenda today.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't see those in the.
Yeah, there are only two. I may have forgotten to give them to you in the rush of everything that was happening on Friday. Do you want me to forward those to you very quickly?
There were two. Let me double check my.
Yeah, they weren't in the folder, and it's fine if there were two. I'm okay with approving the consent. I just didn't want to approve it with it reflecting that there was some if there wasn't any.
Kim, on those two travel forms, they're just taking over Renee and Jenna. They're no longer traveling. It'll be Ryan Kettler and Stephanie Nieto doing the traveling for them.
Yeah, so this is a request that was approved by the board before. We're just substituting a couple of different people. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. And then with that, I will second Noreen's motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Dr. Cleveland and then we'll go into a vote. Go ahead, Dr. Cleveland.
Yeah. I just want to share with the board the process we use and be sure that you are still okay with that and agreeable with it. There are times when a request will come in very late, and generally for a very good reason. And so what the board has allowed me to do in the past is approve those if they are consistent generally with what we normally do and with the mission of the district. So here's the situation. Sometimes they'll come in, there's a really good airline deal that, if they wait, it's going to cost twice as much for them to go. And most of those are really straightforward. They relate to athletic competition, or I can give you an example. A couple of years ago, we had a national history winner, and there was a super short turnaround in that person being able to go. And so the board has given me that flexibility to approve those, but then I bring them back to the board to ratify it. But rather than keeping someone from going, that also plays out during state championships, where we don't know which team is going to advance. And then all of a sudden we've got to travel that we've got to do almost immediately. And so if the board is not okay with that, then we can come back and talk about that. I will tell you, we try to keep those at absolute minimum. And we do very much stress that people need to get those in time for the board to act on them. but there are times when it just isn't really make much sense. And you would, sometimes there's not even enough time to call a special meeting. So I just want to put that out there. If the board's okay with that, we'll continue with what we've done in the past, but the board always knows about it, as we always then follow up and put it in the next agenda. So I just wanted you to be aware that occasionally we have those situations where there's just not time to bring it to the board.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Cleveland. If anyone wants to give their thoughts on that, if they're not okay with Dr. Cleveland doing it, if you want to go ahead and unmute and talk for a moment. Okay. Any other questions with this? Thank you, Dr. Cleveland. I think you're good to continue on with that way. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. We'll go ahead and go to the motion. So we have a motion by Noreen Scott and a second by Jessica Tyler. Kim, can you take a roll call vote for us, please?
Yes, my apologies for not getting that in there. Vice President Morgan.
Yes.
Secretary Scott.
Yes.
Board Member Tripp.
Yes.
Board Member Tyler.
Yes.
President Galbraith.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving to our business portion, we will start with item A to consider the approval of unapproved minutes from January 17th, 2021. Are there any changes that anyone saw on those minutes, or we can go to a motion if to get that. Is there a motion?
This is Board Member Morgan.
Noreen Scott. I move to approve.
Okay, I've got a motion from Jeffrey Morgan. If
Go ahead,
Secretary
Noreen,
Scott,
I'll second.
okay. All right, I have a motion by Noreen Scott and a second by Jeffrey Morgan. Okay, write that down. Did you get that, Kim? I've got a motion by Noreen Scott, a second by Jeffrey Morgan. Okay.
I kind of had it backwards, but okay, we got there.
We got it now. Yeah, I had it backwards too. Okay. So with that, can you take a roll call vote for us on the minutes?
Vice President Morgan.
Yes.
Secretary Scott.
Yes.
Board Member Tripp.
Yes.
Board Member Tyler.
Yes.
And President Galbraith.
Yes.
The motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Hey, Amanda, real quick, I'm looking at this, and I could be wrong, but the dates are showing 1/17/2021.
Yes, that is correct. Did I say the wrong thing? Because it is 1/17/2021, and that is for last week. This was last week's meeting minutes.
But it's 2022.
2022.
Oh,
oops. We'll fix it.
I'm still in 2021. So it is correct on the meeting minutes. It is incorrect on what I said. It is the 1/17/2022 meeting minutes. So I think our motion is still good that these minutes for January 17th, 2022.
So when I make the motion for the board workshop minutes, you want me to say 1/17/2022?
Please, yes.
All right.
We'll have to make that that fix.
Yeah, I think that I probably goofed that up. The other thing is, Claudia, if you could scroll down to the more or less to the bottom of those minutes. I accidentally attached the wrong set of work session minutes. Friday was, never mind about Friday, but if you could scroll down to the bottom of that, Claudia. And then, okay, we're in the wrong set of minutes for the work session then. Can we put up the next set? And I resent those right before the meeting.
Yeah, so if you could go into, if Claudia doesn't have my, do you get them up, Claudia? If everyone could go into their email, or I could share them, I think.
I think I'm
It
sharing
is-
the workshop for January 20,
Yeah,
for the 17th.
yeah. Can you scroll that?
Did you want me to go into the regular?
No.
This is correct. Go down. Let me just make sure it's what she sent us. It shouldn't
Okay.
be very long. It has a German at 512. I think she has the right.
Yeah, this is it. This
is
is the
it.
right one.
Yeah, this is the correct one. Okay, so on that, we're on that one. So we're looking at approval for these minutes that are currently up on the screen, which is for January 17th, 2022, board workshop minutes from last week. Any changes that anyone sees? As far as I can see, they look good. But does anyone have any changes for that? If not, we can go to a
Board Member
motion.
Jeff,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Go ahead, Jeff, or whoever was
Should I
going to.
make the motion or should I second it? Did somebody make the motion?
No one made a motion. Go ahead.
All right, this is Board Member Jeff Morgan. I make a motion for the approval of the January 17th, 2022 Board Workshop Minutes.
This is Gary Tripp. I'll second.
We have a motion by Jeffrey Morgan and a second by Gary Tripp. And Kim, can you take a roll call vote for us on this?
Yes, I can. Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott,
Yes.
Board Member Tripp,
Yes.
Board Member Tyler,
Yes.
and President Galbraith.
Yes.
That motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you. All right, for item C, consider approval of the CNM RRPS MOU Skilled Trades Education. Dr. Visu Cleveland will discuss this with us, and we will take action after.
Okay. I really addressed this in my introductory comments, but so I'll just be very brief. This is a memo of understanding. It is a non-binding agreement, but I think it's pretty clear. It's just an effort to work together to try to bring CTE to our community and to utilize the resources of both Central New Mexico Community College and the Rio Rancho Public School District together. We've come a long way to get to this memo of understanding, but I will answer any questions. And also, Lauren Hatch looked over this in some detail, as did Carl Leppelman. If either of you have any additional comments that you want to make, I'd be fine. But I think it is self-explanatory, and I think it will be a real benefit as we move forward with not only the skilled trades, which this one focuses on primarily, but also health professions and other areas as well.
Thank you, Dr. Cleveland. And I'm just going to go through each board member. Jessica Tyler, do you have any questions on this?
Madam President, no, I do not.
Thank you. And Gary Tripp?
No, I do not, Madam President.
Thank you. Jeffrey Morgan?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Noreen Scott, any questions?
No questions.
Okay. With that, if someone would like to create a motion.
Madam President, this is Gary Tripp. I make a motion that we approve CNM RRPS Memorandum of Understanding for Skills Trade Education.
This is Board Member Jeff Morgan. I second.
Okay. Thank you. We have a motion by Gary Tripp and a second by Jeff Morgan. Kim, can you take a roll call vote for us on this?
Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott,
Yes.
Board Member Tripp,
Yes.
Board Member Tyler,
Yes.
President Galbraith.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Dr. Cleveland, for bringing that. So for item D, it's going to be consideration of award of RFP number 2022-014-SEC- door and hardware maintenance and repair on demand. Michael Madrid is here to discuss with us.
Madam President Galbraith, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Cleveland, as indicated, this is an award request for RFP 22-014-SEC. As Dr. Cleveland mentioned earlier, this is a solicitation to establish a price agreement for on-demand services for door and hardware maintenance of the existing items. I'd kind of like to explain a little bit what some of those systems entail, what some of the repairs entail. So the contractors will be asked to provide maintenance and repairs of the key systems, the lock sets, any cylinders, deadbolts, deadlocks, anti-vandal pull trims, panic exit devices, surface closures, gate closures, automatic operated doors, continuous hinges, and various stops, whether they're floor overhead or wall mounted stops. And this is just to mention a couple of the items that the contractors will be providing services for the district. This procurement is a time and material contract, and I'll kind of explain that in just a bit as we go through the contractors and what they can provide the district. The solicitation responses were from 3 contractors. Brycon Corporation, they provided the response out of their Albuquerque office, but they also have a local office here in Rio Rancho. Overhead Door Company of Albuquerque, out of Albuquerque. Security Hardware Solutions, also out of Albuquerque. As is typical with any procurement, we conduct what's called a pass-fail verification to ensure responsiveness and compliance with all the requirements of the solicitation. All 3 vendors met those mandatory requirements and were deemed responsive, and they were elevated to the evaluation committee for their review. This procurement is pretty unique because the needs are so different. Brycon Corporation brings an ability to serve as a general contractor. So if the scope is quite large or the repairs require those type of services of a GC to go beyond the repairs, maybe the outside repairs need to be addressed by a GC. So their skill set would be valuable to that. We have Overhead Door Company of Albuquerque. They're very specific to what they perform, and their skill set would be beneficial to this contract. The third contractor, Security Hardware Solutions, LLC, they're primarily a material supplier. Should the district be able to self-perform some of the repairs, they would be beneficial to the district with that regard. So due to the uniqueness of all 3 vendors, it's the recommendation of the evaluation committee to solicit board approval for a multiple award for Brycon Corporation, Overhead Door Company of Albuquerque, and Security Hardware Solutions, LLC. And with that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. If anyone has any questions, if you want to go ahead and just raise your little hand, your virtual hand for any questions. Okay. With that, we can go for a motion if anyone would like to create one. Go ahead, Jessica.
I can make Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the award of RFP number 2022-014-SEC for the re-solicitation door and hardware maintenance and repair on demand. For a multiple award, for Brycon Corporation, Overhead Door Company of Albuquerque, and Security Hardware Solutions, LLC.
Do we have a second?
Board Member Jeff Morgan, a second.
Okay. Thank you. We have a motion by Jessica Tyler and a second by Jeffrey Morgan. And Kim, if you could go ahead and take a roll call vote for us.
Vice President Morgan,
Yes.
Secretary Scott,
May have lost her.
internet may have dropped out here. Board Member Tripp,
Yes.
Board Member Tyler,
Yes.
and President Galbraith.
Yes.
And the motion carries.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, board.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, and then for our next and our last item on here, it's going to be our second reading and consideration for approval of changes to policy 1008, student rights and responsibilities. We have Sherry Carver, our Executive Director of Student Services, and also Lauren Hatch, our General Counsel, on with us.
Good evening, Madam President Galbraith, members of the board, and Dr. Cleveland. I bring to you tonight the second reading of the revision of Policy 1008, which is the student and school rights and responsibilities. This policy provides the provisions for appropriate disciplinary processes for students. And the revisions, which I mentioned during the first reading, deals with the review process when a parent disagrees with the sanctions imposed by our hearing officer. after a student is brought to a formal hearing by the school. The Board of Education serves as the review authority, and the revision starts on page 21, if you'll move down to that revision, Claudia. And it specifically gives the board more options, like we talked about before. And if you'll look at 8 little 3 I's, it gives the board 3 options when you determine a review is necessary. The board has the discretion to do any of the following. And I made that clarification at the suggestion of board member Tyler to do any of the following. You can A, conduct a review on the written record of the hearing and decision in the case. Or you can B, limit new submissions by the aggrieved student and school authorities to written materials, or grant a conference or hearing at which the student and the student's representative and school authorities may present their respective reviews in person. Does that make the revision, board member Tyler, that you were requesting so it's more clear?
Yes, Madam President and Ms. Carver, yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much on this. This is such a long policy. As I was going back through it again, it's just such a long, but I think it's important to note that really we're not changing all it. What's changing is just the way that the board is reviewing the case as it comes out. So
correct.
Perfect. Thank you. And with that, if any board member, if you would like to ask a question, if you want to go ahead and you can raise your hand if you have a question on this or any comments on it. Okay. And so with that, we can, I would love to entertain a motion if someone would like to give one. Any motions from the board?
I can make a motion, Madam President.
Go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to approve policy number 1008, student and school rights and responsibilities.
It's Gary Tripp. I second that.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion by Jessica Tyler and a second by Gary Tripp. And if you could do a roll call vote for us, Kim.
Yes, ma'am. Vice President Morgan.
Yes.
Secretary Scott. Board Member Tripp.
Yes.
Board Member Tyler.
Yes.
President Galbraith.
Yes.
And the motion carries 4-0.
All right, thank you so much. Appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to move into our advanced planning. I do have a question on our advanced planning just for the board, just kind of overall for our finance committee meeting that's coming up on, looks like, let's make sure. So February 28th, is that, Jessica, does that look like the next finance committee as I'm looking at it? I just want to make sure I have that right. Okay.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so we have a finance committee meeting coming up on the 28th. I was talking to board member Tyler. And maybe actually, do you want to just talk to it really quick, Jessica? We just kind of get a feel for everyone on that.
Sure. Yes. Thank you, Madam President. So I had a brief meeting last week with Mike Baker about my responsibilities for the financial review committee, and in kind of prepping me on just going over the structure of the budget, he was going to set up an additional meeting for me at district office to learn about the format of the budget as we work, as the budget will be coming up in the coming months. And he didn't know if other board members would also appreciate that presentation. If so, then we would obviously need to do that during a working meeting. If you guys do not have the interest in that, then he could go over that with myself and board member Tripp if he was interested. But we wanted to open it up to the other board members if there was interest.
When and what time are you planning on doing this, Jessica?
So we could probably fit that into the next finance committee meeting, or we would have to do it as a separate presentation during an actual board meeting if we chose to do it that way.
So Jeff, would you be interested in that? So I know Gary probably, I'm sure is, right? Because you need to sit down. I don't think you've had a chance to sit down and do that yet, right?
Yeah, I'd be willing to sit down and do it. I would prefer to do it at a different time than we already have a scheduled meeting. It's what I like to do.
I'm all for that.
Okay. So if we do it at a separate time, we have to do a post a meeting. So I don't, how long, where is Mike Baker on? I'm not sure if he's on with us still. I'm not sure. How much time did he say that would take? I know that we've done it once before. There you are. Hey, Mike. You're muted, Mike.
Yes, good evening, President Galbraith, members of the school board. We could set up a separate finance committee to just go over that. It's really up to the board. We somewhere between 1 and 2 hours, probably 1 hour would be sufficient, I would think. And if the board would want to go beyond that, that would be fine.
Do you think that? Go ahead, Jeff. So there's one scheduled for the 28th. You'd rather do it on a different day than the 28th meeting that we have?
Yes.
Finance?
Yes, I would. Yeah.
Okay. What are you thinking as far as a better time would be?
Just another day during the week. I mean, he's thinking between an hour to 2 hours. I mean, I don't want to add that to a regular meeting time. So I guess I'd have to find out what Gary and Jessica's schedule look like. Mine's pretty flexible, but I at least want to get an idea what works best for them. Is it a Tuesday afternoon, Wednesday afternoon, and what day that is? I mean, I would imagine they would want to do this before we get to the February 28th finance meeting. So that's the reason why I'm asking.
Madam President, and my thought on that is, and I don't know where Jessica and Jeffrey are at, but sure would like to do it if we could, like around 3 or 3:30. That way the staff and Mr. Baker are going home at the end of the day. So I'm flexible with days too. If they have some possibilities for like a 3 o'clock, if that's possible. That way everybody's, the staff that has to be there can be home at a decent hour.
President Galbraith, Mike Baker, Chief Operations Officer. We could get a couple of dates and times out there. Not necessarily it needs to be done before February 28th. We certainly want to get it before we start our budget hearings, however, which would probably be sometime in March. So we still have some time to do it, but probably sooner rather than later would be best.
Okay.
But I'll get with Dr. Cleveland, get with Kim, and propose a few dates and times.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Does that work,
Yeah.
Board Member Tyler?
Yeah,
Good.
that works.
And everyone? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So let me just kind of read through these. We have January 31st is going to be the Cognia accreditation review. Each of you should have received an invite for that. If you haven't, please check in with Kim. February 2nd through the 5th will be the NMSBA Board Member Institute up in Santa Fe. February 14th will be our next regular board meeting at 5:30. February 28th, as we were just talking about, the time on that is actually wrong. I believe that will be 4:30. So February 28th, we'll have a finance committee meeting at 4:30. And then February 28th, 2022, we'll have our regular board meeting scheduled at 5:30. And so with that, Dr. Cleveland, is there anything else in advanced planning that I missed?
No, I think you've got it all.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you. All right. With that, then our meeting's adjourned for tonight. We appreciate you all being here with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kim. Thanks.